and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today I'm going to be bringing you another Thoughts episode on Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 3, The Convert. And this is a very interesting episode of The Mandalorian, and I don't put any negative or positive connotation on that word interesting, but it's the first time we've really had an episode away from Mando and Grogu in their own show, which people have been making jokes like, oh, it's Mando's time to get his show stolen. And while I do agree that it was weird for the show because the show was such a small scale type of journey where we're focusing on two characters almost exclusively throughout the show, and seeing them divert from that all the way in season 3 was interesting, but I did enjoy this episode overall. I think it starts out with one of the best, if not the best, live action dogfight that we've ever got in Star Wars. I absolutely loved it. I think the whole Coruscant portion of the episode was, well, it's not really a portion, it was the entire episode, but I thought that part of the episode was really intriguing, getting to finally have that live action look at the New Republic. What exactly is the New Republic? I feel like the sequels kind of glossed over it, and you really only dive into that with the books, which I really enjoy because I was able to see a lot of the stuff that I had read in the books on screen. I was like, oh, finally, that's being highlighted, and people that don't read the books are finally going to be exposed to, oh, this is what the New Republic is. Oh, this is what's wrong with the New Republic. Oh, this is how something like the First Order could rise up even after they tried to get rid of the last evil empire that took over the Republic. So from a book perspective, I really enjoyed it. And then I also enjoyed Dr. Pershing. I know people were like, oh, he stole an episode from Mando and Grogu, but he was a very crucial part of their journey. Without him in the first season, in episode 3 of the first season, Mando wouldn't have had that catalyst to want to go back and save Grogu, because you see this doctor who's experimenting on this baby, and a scientist within the Empire is a very dangerous person, even though Dr. Pershing never came off as a evil character, and that was true in this episode as well. You see that he has the right intentions, but again, he was just someone that was within the Empire, and he had to work within those means, and he was really there because he was curious. But when you're inside an evil system, as Andor taught us, you might be capable of some inadvertently evil things, which is, of course, I think where this storyline is going. His research, or at least the remnants of his research, because we don't know if he's going to have a brain after what happened at the end of this episode, will be used to either make the Snoke clones or revive Palpatine for the Rise of Skywalker, which is another reason why I thought this episode was interesting, because it really exists to tie into that sequel storyline and hopefully explain a little bit why Palpatine was able to come back, because it's trying to do that thing like Clone Wars did where it adds context to the films. Unfortunately, I don't think that's possible, because even though the prequels weren't perfect, they told a complete story, they had consistent themes, and they had a beginning and an end in mind. It was just confined by time limits of being 2.5-hour movies. You can only do so much with characters over 15 years. But with the sequels, they were disjointed. They weren't all one vision. There obviously wasn't a plan. So I don't think you're going to be able to patch that together with these TV shows. But I do appreciate that they're trying, and I don't think they're doing a bad job at it. It's just, you know, the ending, and it's not very compelling. Palpatine coming back, I don't think was a good decision, and I don't think it really amounted to much in Rise of Skywalker, but unfortunately, The Mandalorian is once again playing that role of starting spin-off shows and also explaining bigger pieces of canon that might not have usually fit within The Mandalorian. So that's kind of my negative feeling towards the episode, and I do feel the Dr. Pershing portion of this episode may have went on a bit too long. I think everything that happened in it was necessary, but I don't think it was really justified to do about 40 minutes of the episode just solely focused on Coruscant. I think the point of that storyline was fulfilled within the first 20 or 30 minutes we were with them. We kind of understood that Pershing was trying to get back into researching. He wanted the New Republic to allow him to do this research. He had good intentions. We don't exactly know what the research is. And that this former communications officer who worked with him with Moff Gideon was helping him. I think it was very clear from the beginning that she was not on his side. She was being way too nice, and there was no way it was just an old coworker buddy like, oh, I know him, I'm going to try and help him out because he's new here. There was definitely that this is going too smoothly for them, and I really did enjoy when she did turn at the end, because there's this feeling throughout the episode that there's this facade, that there's this much darker side of the New Republic. And I think what's so creepy about the machine that they use at the end is that it's administered with a smile. The Mon Cala was like, this is going to be good for you. This is going to be soothing. And it might have been until she cranked it up. But still, it's very unnerving to see someone do something against someone else's will with a smile on their face. It's a different type of evil than what the Empire did. The Empire was very direct. I think of the torture scene with Bix from Andor, where you are very aware that something terrible is about to happen, and then something horrific happens with the screaming children of that alien race, and she basically loses her mind because of it. So it was really cool to see the flip side of what we saw in Andor now happening in Mandalorian with the New Republic compared to the Empire. And I really want to focus in on this idea that the New Republic is a facade. And I think that's really cool. And I think they do a great job of showing it with the ex-Imperials talking about these re-indoctrination camps and then almost getting like a chill up their spine when they hear about it. It's just as dystopian as what the Empire did, especially when you see those interviews where the droid is interviewing Dr. Pershing, is like, do you have any thoughts of malice against the New Republic or any of your co-workers? Do you believe in the New Republic? Like, indoctrinating people is never good, whether it's for the right intention or it's draped in the right intentions. It still will never end well in the long run if that's how you're gaining loyalty. So I thought that was really fascinating, and I hope people still enjoyed that aspect of the episode, even though it wasn't Mando and Grogu on the screen. And I totally get that. If you're there for Mando and Grogu and you expect a fun, light adventure and you're getting a much different type of show, I totally understand that, because that's what happened with Book of Boba Fett, where you're like, wait, I want to see Boba Fett and the whole Tatooine storyline. Why am I focused on Mandalorian Season 3 content? Wait, why is Ahsoka and Luke on my screen right now in the Book of Boba Fett? What is going on? So I totally get that. But I really enjoyed this side of the episode. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this is all very based in the books that we've gotten from Disney over the past couple years that I think have been some of the most consistent pieces of Star Wars storytelling. In Alphabet Squadron, we follow an ex-Imperial pilot who joins up with the New Republic and leads a fighter squadron to take out her old squadron because they still pose a threat to the galaxy. These remnants of the Empire are still out there, and they're still trying to snatch up any power that they can from this vacuum that's been created by the loss of the Emperor and the Death Star 2 being destroyed. And in that book, it starts out with her being in one of these camps for ex-Imperials, and she has this ex-torture droid from the Imperial Army that is basically her counselor, which is very similar to this episode with Pershing, where he has these meetings with these psychiatric droids that ask them all these psych eval questions. And the same thing happens with her and this ex-torture droid, where he basically asks, what's troubling you? Are you feeling good about joining the New Republic? Are you still thinking about your old squadron? That's kind of the parallel that I drew, and I thought it was really sweet to see it in live action. And then the other book I think of, which is one of my favorite Star Wars books, is Bloodlines, and that follows Leia in the New Republic, her being a senator and her rubbing shoulders with these other factions of senators that want to bring back something close to what the Empire was. It was centralists versus populists. So the centralists wanted to bring an empire-type government back, which eventually turns into the First Order. And Leia is part of the populists who want that more democratic republic that once ruled the galaxy. And that's really the only canon insight we get into the New Republic. And it's a great book. I definitely recommend it because you really get a feel for both sides, and you don't entirely dislike the centralists for wanting the Empire back or something along those lines, because as you can see, the New Republic is very shaky at this point. There's not a lot of order in the galaxy. And when you have that power vacuum, and when you have that radical shift from super order focused government to a more lax or even non-existent government, some people are going to love that. Some people like Navarro and Grief being like, oh good, no one can come near Navarro again. This is great. We don't want another big government telling us what to do. And then you have other people that are like, wait, I miss that. I miss the control. I miss being obedient. I miss that so much. I want that back. So while I don't need Mando to be the show that really fleshes out this New Republic shift into the First Order, I do like that there's some seeds being planted here, and maybe we get to see that in future TV shows or movies about how exactly the First Order comes about because of how weak or how much of a facade, like I said earlier, the New Republic is. Because I think it is really interesting. I think there is a story there, but I just don't think the sequels did a great job of establishing that. I mean, when Starkiller Base blew up 5 planets, it was like, okay, like, oh, Hosnian Prime, that was the capital? Oh, who knew? Nope, nobody knew that. Like, we had to find out after the movie. There was no emotional connection to that like we had with Alderaan. We had Princess Leia, like, oh my gosh, wait, that's Princess Leia's homeworld. And speaking of Alderaan blowing up, I'll bring it back to another Star Wars book that heavily influenced this episode, and that's Lost Stars. And Lost Stars is definitely one of the best Star Wars books you could pick up. It's one of my favorite, and it was my introduction to the new Star Wars canon books. It's essentially Romeo and Juliet in space, but instead you have childhood friends. They both join the Empire. They both want to be pilots within the Imperial Navy. And then one realizes, hey, the Empire is not as good as I thought. I'm going to join the rebellion and get away from the Empire. The other one stays in the Empire. And then there's obviously that tension. It's like, oh my gosh, we're on the opposite sides. We have opposite conflicting values. And you just get this really cool insight into normal people in the Empire. There's not a bunch of bad guys surrounded by our main characters. Like, you realize that people that join the Empire think they're doing the right thing. They think they're joining to live out their dreams of being a Navy pilot, or they thought they would bring order to the galaxy. Maybe they saw what the Clone Wars did and they're like, wait a minute, we don't want that again. We want order. We don't want this massive war breaking out again. So you see the Imperials in a different light. And I think Andor introduced that, but still showed that they have some dark sides to them. I think here we see in The Mandalorian, these ex-Imperials just catching up about their job in the Empire, just remembering the little things of their everyday life in the Empire. They don't really get into, oh, I was on a prison ship, or oh, I was on this, or oh, I was on that. Like, they were just doing their jobs, and whether those jobs were frontline military, we don't know, or if they were just maintenance crew back on an Imperial base. We really don't know, but we see that they're normal people. And I really enjoyed that aspect of this episode as well, because I think that really drew from the books, and really diving into the books, you can see those different types of characters, those gray characters, which I think is the biggest strength of the book. So as you can see, I really enjoyed the Dr. Pershing Coruscant portion of this episode. And I do think it leaves some interesting questions, like, why was Elia obsessed with getting revenge on Dr. Pershing? Did she witness some of his experiments and see how terrible he was that we didn't see? Does she really want to serve the New Republic and knows that he could be a dangerous man and kind of takes matters into her own hands and says, no, we can't just re-indoctrinate this guy. We have to get rid of him. Or is there some other motivation where she's still kind of linked to the Empire in some way? I don't know. It's very interesting, and I like the way this episode ended with her. And I think they had great chemistry. I think the only negatives I had with that portion of the episode was I think it was a little bit dragged out, because I think, the point was made within the first 20 minutes. I don't think they needed to drag it out as long. And then the whole train thing, this might be a nitpick, but she said she's done this many times before. So if her goal is always to jump out of the back, well, why didn't they just start in the back car? Like, she knows those guards are going to come in and check for tickets because she's done this before. There's no way every time they don't come and check her ticket by the time they get there. So I'm guessing she always jumps out of the back. So, like, why don't you just start in the back instead of doing that whole, like, walk through the... I don't know. Again, that might be a nitpick, but I just thought that was kind of funny. So now that I've rambled on about the whole Dr. Pershing portion of the episode that people, I don't think enjoyed very much, or maybe they did. I don't know. I couldn't really get a gauge on the internet, but I will jump back into Mando and Grogu, because I did make a big claim in the beginning that the dogfight that this episode started out with was probably one of the best and most visually impressive dogfights we've seen in Star Wars, live action Star Wars. I really can't recall one that was done better. I mean, you have them enter the atmosphere. You have Mando jump out, use his jetpack to hop in his ship before the fighters come and destroy it. Then we have this great chase scene where Mando jumps out behind these cliffs. We have Bo-Katan do this sweet maneuver where she brakes really hard, flips the wing up and does a 360, and then destroys that one TIE fighter. We have Mando climbing the atmosphere, turning off the engines, falling, and then taking out the one that was chasing him. We get this intense bombing run that destroys her palace, so there's an emotional aspect of it, and then all these TIEs come out of nowhere and are chasing them, so it's like, wait, why are there so many TIE fighters over here in this Mandalorian section? That's interesting. So I just think the battle was done so well, and visually, I mean, that was movie quality. It was amazing what they can do with a live action budget nowadays for a TV show. It's crazy. So I just wanted to give props, because I think another reason people probably didn't love the episode is because it starts out with something that amazing. People are like, oh my gosh, wait, this is the first 5 minutes. Where else could this episode go? And then it kind of shifts and slows all the way to a halt with Dr. Pershing in that storyline. So I totally understand if people had a problem with that kind of pacing issue there. And then we end with Bo-Katan inadvertently joining the foundlings, and I don't think she's excited about that, because she's obviously hiding the mythosaur from Din and everyone else. So she still has some sort of motivation to be the ruler of Mandalore, whether that's gaining favor with the mythosaur. I don't know how that plays into it, but I assume that's part of the process. If you don't have the Darksaber, maybe you can get the mythosaur and then you also rule Mandalore. Maybe that outweighs the Darksaber. I'm not sure. I think we've seen that Bo-Katan is changing a bit. She does believe in what these people stand for a bit more after seeing how devoted Din was and after him kind of paying respect to her father and his sacrifice. I don't think she's completely out on it. I just know she has some other intentions that might be a little bit more self-serving. And I don't want her to become a villain. I'm okay with her having an antagonistic role, but I still enjoy that she had that redemption arc in the Clone Wars and in Rebels. I don't want them to revert that. I don't think Dave Filoni would do that with a character that he has spent so much time with. So interested to see where they take Bo-Katan, because she was not thrilled, I don't think, with being a foundling. But again, she also might be. It's hard because everyone has their helmets on. But we do know that she is hiding the mythosaur from people. So we know there is that bit of selfishness that's still existing within her. It was also pretty funny that they showed up and Din was like, I had a witness. It's like, well, the witness you have isn't that great. Bo-Katan isn't exactly the witness you want to bring in and be like, hey, all these other true Mandalorians, look, this fake Mandalorian just told you that I was in the living water, so you have to believe me, right? But he obviously had the water sample, so it doesn't matter. But Din's back to being a Mandalorian, so that's good. Good for him. Keep that helmet on, Pedro. We don't want to see your face at all, right? And I guess, Grogu's got to get a helmet on soon, right? Because he's a foundling. He's a Mandalorian, right? Why does he have his helmet off? Come on. He chose Mando. I guess Grogu also would have been his witness, but Grogu still can't say words yet, even though he's trying. He wanted to say this is the way on the flight, I think. I think he said, eh, and they both look back like, did he just try and say this is the way? So I think Grogu's first words are coming, and they might be coming next week because the next week's episode is called The Foundling. I know this because I'm recording this episode a bit late because I was away this weekend, so I think this is going to come out a day before episode 4 comes out. So hope you guys enjoy listening to this, even though it's a bit late. I really did enjoy episode 3 for the most part. I get why people didn't, and I totally understand why. It might have not been what you were looking for in The Mandalorian. I get that. But as you guys could tell from my previous 2 episodes, I haven't been thrilled with the beginning of season 3 of Mandalorian. It's good, it's enjoyable, but for season 3 and what was promised, I feel like we should have hit the ground running, and I think there was a lot of hiccups with the writing and some uncreative choices in those first 2 episodes surrounding the IG-11 and then the R5 storyline. They didn't make that much sense because, IG-11 was the only droid he would trust, but then IG-11 goes away and he just takes another droid and then he scans the atmosphere himself. He didn't really need the droid, and it was just uncreative and lazy. And I think there was something I read online that essentially the only reason those characters were in it was because originally Grogu wasn't in the beginning of season 3, but then Disney was like, no, we need Grogu back with Mando. So eventually they were just like, okay, we'll just stick Grogu in these scenes but originally the droids were supposed to be Mando's companion on Mandalore, if that makes sense. Like, he was going to talk to the droids, but then the droids ended up being useless because Grogu's back. So Mando can talk to Grogu, which I think makes sense too, because I'm very convinced that the Disney executives were in the writer's room with Jon Favreau and said, no, season 3, Mando, Grogu, back together. Thank you very much. So those are my thoughts overall on the episode. I really enjoyed the book tie-ins, even if they weren't intentionally supposed to be tie-ins to the books. I just like seeing the New Republic, what it stands for, actually seeing it in live action, not just in the books, but getting that explanation of how this also fell to an imperialistic type of government. It was cool to see the Imperials be normal people, and maybe what's going to happen in the future with Dr. Pershing's research. What is Aaliyah trying to play here? Aliyah, I don't know, I forget. How is Bo-Katan going to move forward now that she's within the Foundlings but still holding that secret? Will she embrace the Foundlings, or will she still follow that selfish desire to bring back Mandalore and be the sole leader of Mandalore? Din and Grogu, Din's journey is finally done. He's been redeemed in the eyes of Mandalore, so what's his journey now? We've had this kind of arc for him since the Book of Boba Fett and the end of season 2 of Mandalorian. You know, what is his future now? What is his next goal that he's accomplished this, which is exciting because I feel like we've definitely had this long journey with him, and now we can see where do him and Grogu go next. So we have 5 episodes left. Slow start, but definitely enjoyed this episode. Want to hear your comments. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to know how you felt about this slower episode for Mando, this big divergence from the regular week-to-week Mando episode that we come to expect. And yeah, thank you as always for listening. Really appreciate it. Follow me on Instagram at @star_waters_mark of balance. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the force be with you. Peace.